When I left service, I thought I was stepping away from history. I was wrong, of course. History does not permit retirement. It drifts beyond the horizon while you're looking elsewhere. And when you finally turn back, you discover the stars themselves have changed. The Alliance. I should begin there, because they are the part I understand best, and perhaps the part I feel most conflicted about. We have always told ourselves we exist to preserve life. That is our doctrine, our pride, and in many ways, our failure. Because preservation sounds gentle when spoken in council chambers, but in practice, it becomes something heavier, something that bends under the weight of what must be carried. During the war, the Alliance became what it always feared it might become in quieter ways, a refuge that could no longer remain untouched by what it tried to shelter. The Alliance did what it always does first. It tried to save people. Refugee corridors were opened across collapsing sectors. Civilian extraction routes were established, even while fleet engagements burned entire star lanes. Whole logistical chains were redirected away from victory and toward survival. There is something profoundly human in that instinct. Even when everything is failing, even when strategy would demand prioritization, the Alliance still asks, who can we bring home? And yet, there is a cost to that compassion when it exists inside a galaxy already breaking. The Alliance did not escalate the war in the way others did, but it was pulled into it regardless, because borders stopped meaning anything once the Admiralty fractured and the hyperlanes began to fail. We quickly found ourselves drifting into friction with the other great powers. In our desperate rush to salvage lives, we operated along the fractured seams of contested space and the outer edges of our own border systems, where authority blurred and tensions already ran thin. This brought us into repeated clashes with the rigid severity of the Empire, whose containment doctrines interpreted our rescue efforts as an unacceptable disruption to galactic stability. We also brushed against the Covenant's tightly controlled frontier regions, where even minor presence was met with immediate and uncompromising responses. At the same time, the sudden, precisely synchronized mobilizations of a machine civilization like the Nexus made it clear how easily humanitarian operations could be mistaken for incursions in already volatile fringe zones. But wars are sometimes remembered through smaller symbols. Squadron 357. Levin Ray became one of those symbols. I suspect the pilots themselves would dislike hearing that. Most frontline combat personnel do, but history has a habit of attaching meaning to people long before they are ready to carry it. What made Squadron 357 significant was not simply their operational record, though that alone became the subject of military academies afterward. It was what they represented to the Alliance during the worst years of the war. They were young, too young, perhaps, for the weight eventually placed upon them. And yet they continued flying into regions most people had already accepted as lost. Their operations intersected nearly every major front of the conflict: evacuation cover missions, deep strike campaigns, containment operations, and eventually, the final convergence mission that helped bring the war itself to an end. But I think the reason the Alliance embraced them so strongly is because they reflected something the galaxy feared it was losing: the belief that courage and compassion could still coexist. That sounds sentimental, I know. Age has made me less embarrassed by sentimentality than I once was. The pilots of Levin Ray were, on several occasions, accused of demonstrating poor procedural discipline. The evidence was difficult to dispute. Withdrawal windows were missed. Abandonment protocols were ignored. Rescue operations continued long after command considered them concluded. In their defense, they were usually busy trying not to leave anyone behind. Fortunately, that same disregard for clean procedure was often matched by considerable skill and steadiness under pressure, and there were enough instances where their judgment and courage compensated for what the manuals would have called recklessness, even if it rarely fit neatly within it. Strategically questionable decisions, some Imperial analysts later remarked. Perhaps. And yet the Alliance understood something important in those moments. If civilizations survive by abandoning every instinct that once made survival meaningful, then eventually survival itself becomes hollow. Levin Ray became a selfless symbol of that survival. In those final dark hours of the convergence approach, they flew not for glory, but as an absolute offering to the future, a final, desperate attempt to hold the line for a galaxy that had forgotten how to hope. But history is a treacherous storyteller, and I refuse to let it simplify what happened. Levin Ray did not end the war alone. They could not have. The myth-makers prefer to paint them as solitary heroes, but the cold mathematics of reality tell a different story. If Levin Ray was the spearhead, the rest of the galaxy became the shield. That final, impossible mission succeeded only because the very factions we had spent years distrusting, and in some cases fighting against, chose to bleed alongside us. When the time came, the other powers threw themselves into the fire. There were agonizing sacrifices made in the dark by pilots who wore different emblems but shared the same desperation. A multi-faction screen formed around our strike groups. Long-standing rivalries were quietly buried in the ash as foreign fleets bought Levin Ray the minutes, the math, and the physical space they needed to press forward. I will speak on the exact nature of those factions and the specific scars they carried in the logs to come. They deserve their own accounting, free from our assumptions. Because the Alliance did not win battles in the traditional sense, but it held fragments of civilization together long enough for other parts of the galaxy to stop falling apart completely. And perhaps that is its quiet legacy. Not triumph, not dominance, just continuity, held together by exhaustion and compassion, refusing to fully extinguish itself. And perhaps that is why Squadron 357 mattered as much as they did. Not because they ended the war by their own hand, but because, in a galaxy increasingly shaped by fear, their selflessness reminded a fractured coalition what they were actually trying to survive for. I will speak next about the Covenant. I find I have to be careful with them, not because they are incomprehensible, but because they are deeply, painfully consistent. And consistency in a broken galaxy can be either salvation or tragedy. Until my next log.